When a narcissist realizes you've figured them out, they'll try this. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Carl Jung. When you finally recognize the patterns of a narcissist, you reclaim a part of your power they never wanted you to see. In this video from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore what truly happens when a narcissist realizes you've figured them out, how their mask slips, how their control tactics shift, and how you can stay rooted in peace and self-respect no matter what they try. Remember, awareness is your greatest protection. Have you ever noticed someone changing their behavior the moment you saw through their act? Share your experience in the comments. Your story may help someone else awaken to their own truth. 1. The turning point. When you see behind the mask. The moment you see behind a narcissist's mask marks a profound turning point in both psychology and spirituality. It is as if the illusion that once clouded your vision suddenly dissolves, and what you once mistook for love, admiration, or connection is revealed for what it truly was: control, dependency, and manipulation. This awakening doesn't come from anger, but from awareness, the kind that Carl Jung called the birth of consciousness. When you stop feeding their ego, when you no longer react or seek their approval, you remove the mirror that reflects their false self back to them. To a narcissist, this act is unbearable. Their identity is built entirely on external validation, on the constant need to be admired, obeyed, and adored. When your awareness shines light on their illusion, it shakes the fragile foundation of their existence and exposes the emptiness they've spent a lifetime hiding from. At first, they will resist the truth with every ounce of their being. The exposure of their inner void is their greatest fear, and when that fear surfaces, their behavior becomes erratic and unpredictable. They may try to pull you back in with kindness, pretending to have changed, only to switch again into rage or accusation once they sense you are slipping beyond their control. They may gaslight you, twist your words, or play the victim to elicit guilt and confusion. But what you are really witnessing is not strength, it is desperation. The narcissist is not fighting you. They are fighting the collapse of their illusion. Their need to dominate your perception is the only way they can maintain the illusion of power. For without your belief in their mask, they must confront the terrifying truth of their own emptiness. Carl Jung taught that what we deny in ourselves becomes our shadow. And in the narcissist, that shadow consumes nearly all that is real. They build an elaborate personality to escape the pain of seeing themselves honestly. When you awaken spiritually and begin to see through appearances, your light becomes the mirror they cannot bear to face. They project their shame, fear, and self-loathing onto you, hoping you'll carry it for them. Yet this is precisely where your spiritual awakening deepens, when you learn not to internalize their darkness, but to observe it with compassion and detachment. The more you stand in your awareness, the more powerless their manipulation becomes. The dynamic that once bound you together begins to dissolve, for awareness is stronger than control. Through this experience, you begin to understand a deeper truth about spirituality and spiritual awakening. It is not only about peace and love, but also about discernment and clarity. The narcissist becomes an unwilling teacher, forcing you to face your own attachments, your longing to be understood, your fear of rejection, and your tendency to rescue others at the expense of yourself. As you release these patterns, your energy shifts. You no longer attract chaos, but calm. No longer seek validation, but inner alignment. You realize that the true enemy was never the narcissist, but the part of you that needed their approval to feel worthy. When you reach this level of awareness, their games lose meaning. You see their tactics not as personal attacks, but as symptoms of their pain. You no longer react. You respond with stillness. You no longer chase love. You embody it. That is the essence of spiritual maturity, choosing awareness over illusion. What once drained you now teaches you. What once hurt you now frees you. The narcissist, sensing that your light can no longer be controlled, will either retreat or collapse under the weight of their own facade. And though they may never acknowledge it, your awakening has already undone their power. Their illusion cannot survive the truth, and the truth is now living in you. Before we unveil the next phase of this psychological battle, take a moment to subscribe to spiritual wisdom and stand with those who value awareness and truth. Your support helps us share more of Carl Jung's timeless insights on the human psyche and spiritual awakening. 2. The war begins psychological retaliation. When a narcissist feels that you've uncovered the truth behind their mask, they don't surrender. They start a silent but vicious psychological war. Their entire sense of control depends on maintaining the illusion that they are superior, flawless, and always right. When that illusion breaks, they feel exposed and powerless, so they retaliate through manipulation. They use denial to erase your version of events, projection to throw their flaws onto you, and rationalization to make their cruelty seem justified. Their goal is not to find peace or clarity. It's to make you question your memory, your feelings, and even your sanity so that you fall back into their control. You'll hear them twist every truth into a lie that benefits them, turning themselves into the victim and you into the villain, all while claiming they're the ones being wronged. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But narcissists cannot understand themselves, because that would require them to face the emptiness and shame they've spent their lives avoiding. Instead, they defend their false self by rewriting reality. They must convince both you and themselves that they are innocent. They will rationalize their actions by saying, "You made me do it," or "You're too sensitive," shifting every responsibility away from their behavior. This psychological retaliation is their way of keeping control without ever appearing to be the aggressor. They will test your boundaries, manipulate your emotions, and distort your truth until you start doubting your own mind. Yet once you recognize these tactics for what they are, something powerful happens. You begin to see through the illusion. The more you understand their behavior, the less control they have over you. This is where your spiritual development becomes your greatest weapon. Instead of reacting in anger or trying to prove your worth, you learn to stand still in truth. Spirituality teaches that awareness itself is strength, and silence can be louder than confrontation. You do not need to engage in their chaos. Your peace becomes your resistance. A narcissist's war can only continue if you keep fighting. When you stop feeding their need for attention and validation, their power fades. So when their manipulation begins, when they deny, project, or blame, you can see it not as a reflection of your failure, but of their inner wounds. Their behavior is not about you. It's about their fear of being seen. You are simply the mirror showing them what they've refused to face. By remaining centered in your truth, you turn their attacks into opportunities for growth. Remember, you don't heal by winning their approval. You heal by reclaiming your peace. When you stop explaining, defending, or proving, you step out of their control cycle and into your own authority. The lesson here is profound. Spiritual development is not about changing others, but mastering your response to their chaos. The real victory comes not through revenge or argument, but through your calm, your clarity, and your unwavering commitment to your inner light. Comment below, "I stand in my truth," if you're ready to face manipulation with clarity and strength. Like this video and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights on awakening your inner power and mastering the psychology of self-protection. 3. The battle for reality, gaslighting, and mind colonization. When a narcissist realizes you've seen through their mask, they don't back down. They intensify their control in the shadows, turning manipulation into psychological warfare. Their goal is no longer just to influence you, it's to rewrite your very perception of reality. They begin what can only be described as psychological colonization, invading your mind piece by piece until your intuition no longer feels like your own. Through gaslighting, they twist your words, alter the meaning of past events, and plant seeds of self-doubt so subtle that you begin to question your sanity. They want you to lose faith in your inner compass, to see them as the sole keeper of truth. And once you start depending on their version of events, they know they've won, not because you've surrendered, but because you've stopped trusting yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Through pride, we are ever deceiving ourselves. But deep down, below the surface of the average conscience, a still, small voice says to us, something is out of tune." That quiet voice within you, the voice of intuition, is the first thing they try to silence. This form of gaslighting is more than manipulation. It's an assault on your spirit, a slow corrosion of your connection to reality. The narcissist's mission is to dominate your perception, to make you doubt the evidence of your own eyes and the wisdom of your own heart. They replace your confidence with confusion, your peace with anxiety. Every disagreement becomes a trap. Every truth you speak turns into ammunition used against you. And yet, it's not random, it's strategic. They keep you hypervigilant, scanning for danger, walking on eggshells, too drained to fight back. This constant distortion makes you feel like your thoughts are no longer safe, like your emotions are unreliable, and your truth an illusion. But what you must understand is that this is their design: to colonize your consciousness until your mind begins to echo their voice instead of your own. According to the spiritual wisdom of Carl Jung, the greatest war is never with the world, but within the human psyche itself, the war between the authentic self and the false self imposed upon it. Narcissistic manipulation is an attempt to cut you off from that authentic self, to disconnect you from your inner truth and spiritual awareness. They feed on the confusion between what you know and what they insist you believe. But no matter how much they twist your perception, your soul remains untouched, whispering quietly beneath the noise. Healing begins the moment you start listening to that whisper again. When you reclaim your intuition, when you say, "No, I know what I felt. I know what I saw," you begin to reclaim your freedom. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Seeing through their illusion is your moment of awakening. When you stop accepting their narrative and start trusting your intuition, the entire manipulation collapses like a house of cards. You realize you were never weak. You were being conditioned to forget your strength. You were never unstable. You were being made to question your inner light. And once you awaken to that truth, their power over you dissolves completely, because no one can colonize a mind that has remembered its own divine reality. 4. The outer war, the smear campaign. When internal control begins to fail, the narcissist shifts to what can only be described as social warfare, a battle of perception and reputation. They twist your past, distort your intentions, and turn your most vulnerable moments into weapons. What was once shared in trust becomes ammunition in their new campaign. They begin whispering half-truths and lies, weaving a story that portrays them as the victim and you as the unstable aggressor. They gather allies, what psychologists call flying monkeys, who unknowingly participate in the destruction of your image. Through charm, persuasion, and deceit, the narcissist manipulates these people into believing their version of events. They do not attack you directly at first. Instead, they poison the minds of others so that when you speak the truth, it sounds like noise against a narrative already set. This form of social manipulation is not random. It is deliberate, calculated, and rooted in their fear of losing control. They cannot bear the idea that you see through their mask, that you have awakened to their illusion. In the language of spirituality and spiritual awakening, this is a sacred confrontation between light and shadow. When you expose their deception, you mirror back the darkness they've long denied within themselves. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But the narcissist refuses consciousness. They fear the mirror that forces them to face the truth. So they project that fear onto you. The very qualities they despise in themselves, weakness, deceit, instability, are now the ones they accuse you of possessing. What you are witnessing is not just psychological manipulation, but a spiritual projection, an attempt to transfer their inner chaos into your reality. In this war of perception, the narcissist's goal is to isolate you. They want you to question your worth, your memories, your identity. They will use your empathy against you, pushing you to explain yourself over and over until you begin to doubt your own truth. They thrive on emotional exhaustion because confusion is control. Yet in this painful unraveling, something profound occurs. You begin to see the difference between those who truly know your heart and those who only knew the story told about you. The smear campaign becomes a revelation, a process that strips away false connections and exposes the spiritual blindness of those who believed the lies. Isolation, though excruciating, becomes a sacred cocoon for rebirth. When you stop fighting to prove your innocence, you shift from reaction to awareness. You begin to understand that truth does not require validation. It reveals itself in time. The smear campaign collapses under its own weight because deception cannot sustain itself in the presence of authenticity. The narcissist's lies lose power once you withdraw your energy from their game. This is where spiritual awakening takes root, in the quiet strength of knowing who you are without needing to defend it. peace becomes your protection, silence becomes your weapon, and grace becomes your victory. What they intended to destroy you with becomes the very experience that deepens your wisdom and solidifies your light. Through this external war, your inner world becomes unshakable, and in the end, you realize that their need for control was never stronger than your capacity to transcend it. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss insights that awaken your mind and strengthen your spirit against manipulation. Type in the comments, "I stand firm in my truth," to affirm your power and stay grounded in spiritual clarity. 5. The hoovering phase, seduction and false reconciliation. When a narcissist realizes you've seen through their mask, they shift from rage and slander to a more deceptive strategy known as hoovering. This is the stage where they suddenly reappear, pretending to be remorseful, loving, or broken, hoping to pull you back into the emotional web they once controlled. They might send messages filled with nostalgia, remind you of your happiest moments together, or even stage personal crises to awaken your compassion. It's not love, it's a test. They want to see if your boundaries still hold, if they can still reach your heart, and if the emotional fuel they once drained from you is still available. Beneath their words of regret hides the same hunger for control, masked by charm and feigned vulnerability. They know exactly how to touch the part of you that still believes in the goodness of people, the part that hopes others can change if given enough love. But as Carl Jung wisely said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. The narcissist's sudden transformation isn't an awakening. It's an act of a spiritual illusion designed to keep you from seeing their emptiness. They speak the language of healing, but carry the vibration of manipulation. They mirror your compassion, not because they feel it, but because they know it's the door through which you once let them in. True spirituality teaches you that love without respect is manipulation, and forgiveness without accountability is self-betrayal. You can understand someone's pain without allowing them to make you suffer. You can wish them healing without stepping back into the fire that once burned you. This is where spiritual development truly begins, when you stop mistaking chaos for connection and pity for compassion. Every hoovering attempt is a spiritual exam, asking whether you will fall for the illusion again or honor the strength you've gained. They might cry, apologize, or say they've changed. But remember, these are emotional triggers designed to lower your guard. The narcissist's greatest fear isn't losing you, it's losing control over you. Your silence, your calm, and your refusal to react strip them of the power they once had. What they call coldness is actually clarity. What they call distance is protection. You are not cruel for choosing peace over pain. You are finally walking in alignment with your higher self. The moment you stop responding, you shift the energy entirely. You move from being their supply to being your own source of strength. This is the sacred space where spirituality and self-respect meet, where your boundaries become your protection and your awareness becomes your freedom. Each time they try to draw you back, see it as another opportunity to practice discernment, to stay grounded in your truth, and to affirm that your healing is permanent. The test was never about their apology. It was about your evolution. And every time you refuse to return to the pain you once had, to fight your way out of. You step deeper into spiritual development and closer to the peace that can never be manipulated. 6. The final rage, the extinction burst. When every tactic of manipulation fails, the narcissist's mask begins to crack, revealing what Carl Jung described as the terror of the unconscious self facing exposure. This eruption, often called the final rage or extinction burst, is not ordinary anger. It is the ego's desperate attempt to survive. You'll see them lash out in fury, not because they hate you, but because they fear the loss of control over you. Their entire sense of worth depends on your reaction, on your emotional investment, on your fear. When you stop feeding them that energy, when you respond with calm neutrality, their illusion of dominance begins to disintegrate. This is where your true spiritual wisdom becomes your shield. You learn that your silence, your composure, and your indifference are not acts of weakness, but reflections of mastery. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you choose not to react, you break the mirror that reflects their chaos into your soul. Their rage, though explosive, cannot last. Like a fire deprived of oxygen, it consumes itself when there's nothing left to burn. They may accuse you, twist the truth, or attempt to guilt you back into submission, but none of it can touch you once you've detached emotionally. What they perceive as coldness is actually consciousness. It's you reclaiming your inner peace after years of psychic warfare. The narcissist will scream louder, play the victim, or suddenly act loving again, hoping to reel you back in. But you must see through the performance. Remember, spiritual awakening is not about fighting darkness. It's about refusing to let it enter your heart. The less you engage, the faster their energy collapses under its own emptiness. The extinction burst is the death rattle of their false self. It's their ego realizing that the power they once had over you was an illusion, and your awareness is the light that exposes it. When you stay calm, breathe deeply, and choose peace, you are teaching your nervous system that safety comes from within, not from their approval. Your serenity is the very thing they cannot control, and therefore the thing that destroys their grip on you. As Jung wisely said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You've made their darkness conscious, and now it can no longer manipulate you. So when their rage erupts, stand still like a mountain in the storm. Let them flail, let them twist, but do not let them draw you into their chaos. Every calm breath you take weakens their power. Every quiet moment you claim is a declaration of self-ownership. Their fire fades, your light remains. That is the essence of spiritual wisdom, the ability to see through illusion and remain centered in truth. Their world shakes because you no longer feed it. And in that silence, their control ends, while your freedom truly begins. To affirm your strength in breaking free from manipulation, declare your inner power. Comment below, "I rise above the chaos," to honor your resilience and remind others that true peace begins when you no longer feed their rage. 7. The spiritual victory, liberation, and transformation. Surviving this war is not about running away. It's about being reborn from within. You finally understand that the problem was never you. It was the impossible mission of trying to heal someone who thrives on illusion. Narcissists are addicted to control, and their favorite game is to twist your empathy into chains. They build their power by convincing you that your love can save them, while their lies slowly erase your sense of self. But when you begin to see through their performance, the illusion shatters. That's when the true war begins, not with them, but within yourself. It's the battle between your old self that needed to be understood and your new self that refuses to be used. This is the essence of spirituality and spiritual awakening. Not the escape from darkness, but the courage to walk through it and come out with wisdom instead of bitterness. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you face the narcissist's darkness, you inevitably meet your own shadow, the parts of you that tolerated manipulation because you believed love required suffering. But now, awareness becomes your liberation. Every insult that once pierced you becomes evidence of your growth. Every silent treatment that once crushed you becomes a mirror showing how much your peace depends on self-respect, not validation. You no longer chase apologies that never come, because you understand that closure is not given. It is created. You stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop rescuing those who sabotage themselves. This transformation is not about vengeance or pride. It's about reclaiming your sovereignty and protecting your spirit from emotional predators who feed on confusion. As the fog clears, your empathy evolves into discernment. You begin to see patterns instead of promises. You no longer mistake love bombing for affection, nor manipulation for care. You recognize that when someone constantly projects their flaws onto you, it's not your responsibility to carry their unhealed pain. You start asking deeper questions. Does this person honor the truth? Do they seek healing or control? And if the answer is no, you walk away, not in anger, but in peace. This is how wounds turn into wisdom. Pain refines your intuition, teaching you to feel the energy behind words, to notice when someone's charm conceals emptiness, and to trust your body's quiet warnings more than the noise of flattery. Every boundary you set is a prayer to the universe that says, "I am ready for peace." And slowly, peace answers back. Your nervous system begins to rest. Your laughter returns. Your heart reopens not to the same people, but to a higher frequency of love that requires no begging, no convincing, no shrinking. This is spiritual power, silent, steady, unshakable. You realize that the real transformation happens when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Your worth is not a debate. Your light does not depend on their recognition. You simply exist in truth, and that truth itself becomes your armor. The narcissist's chaos no longer affects you because you've stopped dancing to their rhythm. You've learned to stand still in your presence, anchored in self-awareness. And in that stillness, you discover what true victory feels like. Not revenge, not validation, but freedom. You faced their darkness and found your own light. You reclaimed what was stolen, your clarity, your boundaries, your sense of peace. You now understand that surviving this war was never about winning against them, but about awakening within yourself. This is the transformation Carl Jung spoke of, where shadow becomes teacher and pain becomes portal. Empathy transforms into discernment. Wounds evolve into wisdom. Pain alchemizes into spiritual power. And through it all, you rise not as a survivor, but as someone reborn in the purest form of truth. 8. The ultimate lesson: sovereignty of the soul. Carl Jung's timeless teaching reveals that true enlightenment is not born from avoiding darkness, but from courageously facing it. When the mask of the narcissist finally falls and you witness the truth behind their manipulation, what once felt like devastation transforms into initiation. Their destruction becomes the crucible in which your soul is purified. Through this pain, you awaken not as a victim, but as a sovereign being who recognizes that suffering was never meant to destroy you, but to awaken your inner authority. You no longer dance in their drama because you've outgrown the stage. You've risen beyond their illusions and remembered your divine self. This is not a battle of revenge, but a silent ascension, where the energy once used to defend yourself is now channeled into self-awareness, dignity, and grace. The narcissist's chaos was a mirror reflecting your unhealed shadows. The parts of you that once believed love had to be earned, that boundaries made you unkind, that forgiveness meant tolerating abuse. But now you see clearly. Each lie they told taught you the sacred value of truth. Each silent treatment initiated you into the power of your own stillness. Each manipulation showed you where you had yet to claim your worth. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And now, that fate has become your freedom. What once felt like betrayal now feels like revelation, for you understand that no one can truly control you once you awaken to your own awareness. In that awareness, the illusion of their power dissolves, and you begin to embody the highest form of spiritual development, the sovereignty of your soul. This sovereignty is not arrogance. It is alignment with truth. It is the unshakable knowing that your light can stand in the presence of any darkness and remain untouched. Spirituality, at its deepest essence, is not the denial of evil, but the realization that it holds no power over a conscious mind. When you stop reacting, when you observe instead of absorbing, when you choose peace over chaos, the narcissist's control crumbles. They can no longer feed on your energy because you have transcended the game. You become the quiet observer, radiant and self-contained, untouchable by the storms that once broke you. And in that stillness, you realize that the greatest revenge is freedom, the kind of freedom that no one can grant or take away. The narcissist loses because you no longer need to win. Your soul has already remembered its throne. Every wound becomes a sacred seal of transformation, every heartbreak a lesson in awakening, and every ending a return to wholeness. You are the living embodiment of what Jung called the individuation process, the merging of shadow and light into one radiant truth. You have walked through the fire, and now you burn not with pain, but with purpose. If you find this content touching your heart, please consider becoming a member to receive more in-depth lessons and direct support from me. In the end, understanding how a narcissist reacts when they realize you've seen through their illusion isn't about blame. It's about awareness and freedom. Carl Jung reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. By recognizing manipulation and reclaiming your emotional power, you step out of their control and return home to your authentic self. If this message from spiritual wisdom has helped you see things more clearly, please like this video, share it with others who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos on self-awareness and healing. When the empath stops explaining, peace finally begins. Silence is a source of great strength. Lao Tzu. There comes a time in every empath's journey when explaining, defending, and justifying your heart no longer feels like peace. It feels like exhaustion. True serenity begins when you stop needing to be understood by those still asleep to their own inner world. In this video, we'll explore the moment an empath finally chooses quiet over chaos and understanding over approval. As you listen, reflect on your own life. Have you reached that sacred point where peace matters more than validation? Share your thoughts below, and let's grow together on this path of spiritual wisdom and awakening. 1. The end of explanation marks the beginning of peace. Peace arises the moment the empath no longer needs to be understood, because the need to explain has always been a residue of childhood conditioning, a quiet belief that love must be earned through justification. From a young age, the empath learns that harmony comes only when others approve, that to be accepted means to make everyone else feel comfortable. So they grow into peacemakers, constantly translating pain into understanding, soothing storms that were never theirs to calm. But through spirituality and spiritual awakening, they begin to see that the endless act of explaining was never an expression of love. It was a cry for belonging. The moment this realization dawns, silence becomes the most powerful form of self-love. To allow misunderstanding without fear is not indifference. It is mastery. It is the moment the empath reclaims the fragments of their energy scattered across years of over-explaining and emotional labor. They begin to understand that not every truth needs to be defended, and not every distortion deserves correction. As Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The empath realizes that the urge to explain often hides a deep insecurity, the fear of being misjudged, unloved, or abandoned. But once they awaken, they see that real love does not require proof. The soul does not beg to be seen. It simply shines. In this higher awareness, peace no longer depends on validation. It comes from the quiet knowing that your heart remains pure, even when others project their shadows onto you. The empath learns to rest in this stillness, to speak less and feel more, to observe instead of react. They start to see that trying to make others understand is like pouring light into a closed jar. It only exhausts you. Through the lens of spirituality, they discover that silence is not emptiness. It is sacred space. It is the field where the soul expands, where the divine whispers louder than the noise of misunderstanding. The more they awaken, the more the empath recognizes how explaining used to drain their life force. Every defense was a small betrayal of self, an energetic transaction where peace was traded for approval. But now, they choose a different path, the path of quiet confidence. Their silence no longer hides pain. It radiates strength. They no longer chase closure because they realize peace was never something to achieve, but something to allow. Those who are meant to understand will feel their truth in the stillness, while those who cannot are simply lessons that taught them detachment. This is the sacred maturity of the awakened empath, to let misunderstanding exist without losing inner balance. It takes courage to stand in truth while others misinterpret your light, to stay calm when accused of being distant or cold. Yet in this very moment, the empath transcends their old identity as the fixer. They no longer seek to heal through explanation, but through presence. They no longer try to convince, they embody. In this state, peace is no longer an outcome. It becomes their nature. Comment below, I choose peace over explanation, if you're ready to let go of the need to be understood and embrace your inner calm. 2. The false virtue of self-erasure. Empaths often grow up believing that love means endless sacrifice, that compassion is proven by how much pain they can carry for others. Yet this illusion only leads them into a cycle of self-erasure, where their worth becomes tied to how much they give, explain, and endure. They absorb other people's emotions, justify every misunderstanding, and constantly over-explain their intentions, all while silently draining their own life force. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But when an empath keeps explaining themselves to those who do not listen, they abandon that privilege. They fall into the archetype of the persecuted healer, the one who bleeds to keep others warm. This endless explanation becomes a subtle form of self-neglect, disguised as kindness, yet built upon fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, and fear of being misunderstood. The more they explain, the more they tie invisible cords to people who thrive on their energy. Real compassion, however, has boundaries. It is not about carrying someone's emotional weight, but about allowing them to carry their own. When an empath learns to stop explaining, they begin to trust silence more than defense, presence more than persuasion. Their energy, once scattered across countless explanations, starts to return home. They realize that spirituality is not about being endlessly available, but about being deeply aligned with one's truth. True compassion flows from clarity, not exhaustion. The moment you stop justifying yourself to those who never cared to understand, your energy shifts. You move from survival to serenity, from reaction to response. You begin to understand that peace is not achieved by controlling others' perceptions, but by mastering your own vibration. This is where spiritual development truly begins. When the empath finally realizes that their role is not to fix or prove, but to be. Silence becomes their strength, boundaries their prayer, and solitude their teacher. No longer chained to the need for validation, they discover a new form of freedom, one where love is no longer transactional, but sovereign. The peace that follows is not the absence of noise, but the presence of alignment. It is the quiet knowing that your worth has never depended on explanation. In this stillness, the empath transforms from a wounded giver into a conscious creator, channeling energy not into pleasing others, but into becoming whole again. And in that sacred balance between compassion and self-respect, they finally experience the profound serenity that spirituality was always meant to bring. Have you ever caught yourself dimming your own light just to keep others comfortable? If so, share your story in the comments below. Your voice may help someone reclaim theirs. And if you're still learning to stop erasing yourself, comment, "I choose to shine," so we can walk this path of self-worth and peace together. 3. Silence as spiritual power. Silence is not emptiness. It is spiritual power in motion. When you, as an empath, finally stop explaining yourself to those who twist your words or drain your peace, you begin to feel an energy shift inside you. Carl Jung once said, In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. And in silence, that hidden order reveals itself. You start to understand that silence does not mean weakness. It means wisdom. The moment you stop feeding the noise with explanations, those who used guilt to control you lose their power. Silence becomes your sacred boundary, a mirror reflecting truth without needing defense. It is not about being cold or distant. It is about choosing peace over chaos, alignment over validation, and energy preservation over emotional exhaustion. Empaths often carry the burden of over-explaining because they fear being misunderstood. They give endless reasons, hoping to prove their good heart, not realizing that their constant explanations are emotional leaks. Spiritual wisdom teaches that truth does not demand justification. It simply exists. When you embrace this awareness, you begin to hold your silence like a crown. Your calm becomes your language. Your restraint becomes your strength. Those who once thrived on your reactions start to fade because they can no longer feed on your emotional openness. Silence teaches discernment. It shows you who listens to understand and who listens to manipulate. Carl Jung believed that what we resist persists, and through silence, you stop resisting. You no longer chase understanding from those unwilling to meet you there. Instead, you reclaim your inner order, finding peace not through being heard, but through being still. Silence exposes false intentions without argument. It makes people confront the emptiness of their own projections. When you stop explaining, your energy speaks louder than any words could. It whispers self-respect, self-trust, and divine awareness. You begin to realize that peace was never something external to achieve. It was an inner vibration to return to. Through spiritual awakening, you understand that not every storm needs your response. Not every misunderstanding needs your energy. And not every person deserves access to your truth. Silence is the ultimate form of self-mastery. It turns pain into power, chaos into clarity, and confusion into confidence. It teaches you that you don't need to defend who you are when you live in alignment with your soul. The empath who stops explaining is no longer trying to be understood. They are simply being. And in that beingness, peace does not just begin, it becomes the natural state of your existence. 4. Individuation and psychological maturity. Carl Jung's profound principle of individuation reveals itself in the empath's silent transformation, the moment they stop explaining and begin embodying peace. To explain endlessly is to wear the persona, the social mask Jung described as the part of us that seeks approval and safety through pleasing others. The empath, driven by deep sensitivity, has often mistaken explaining for connection and over-understanding for love. Yet in spirituality and spiritual awakening, the soul begins to see that explanation is a defense mechanism of fear. The fear of being unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. True maturity, Jung taught, is born when the self integrates both the light and the shadow, and no longer relies on outer validation to confirm inner truth. The empath's journey, then, is not about convincing others to understand them, but about standing in quiet alignment with who they truly are. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your energy from the chaos of misunderstanding. You begin to realize that not everyone is meant to meet you in your depth. And that is not rejection, it is redirection toward inner sovereignty. Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The empath learns to see criticism, projection, and disbelief not as personal attacks, but as mirrors of human limitation. In that recognition, the empath evolves from emotional dependency to inner mastery. This is the stage of individuation where peace replaces people-pleasing and stillness becomes stronger than speech. Silence, once painful, now becomes sacred because it no longer hides fear. It holds power. Spiritual awakening brings clarity. You see that your need to explain was never about others understanding you, but about you trying to prove your worth. As consciousness deepens, you discover that your worth never needed proof. It only needed recognition from within. Every misunderstanding becomes a test of your alignment. Every moment of silence, a chance to affirm your truth without words. The empath learns that when you understand yourself, you stop chasing others' understanding. You no longer explain your kindness, your boundaries, or your intuition. You allow your energy to speak where words would only distort. This is the quiet revolution of maturity, choosing peace over performance, self-validation over external approval, and authenticity over adaptation. Through the lens of Jungian wisdom, this transformation marks the merging of the conscious and unconscious, the birth of wholeness. You stand unshaken, aware that explaining is a habit of the fragmented self, while silence is the language of the integrated soul. To embody peace is to live without the need to defend it. To embrace misunderstanding is to understand that not everyone can perceive at your level of awareness. And in that acceptance, the empath transcends the cycle of justification and enters the realm of freedom. This is what Jung called the individuation process, the path of returning to one's center, where the self no longer seeks to be seen, but to be. When the empath stops explaining, they finally awaken into the purest form of power, peace that requires no witness. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on mastering individuation and achieving true psychological maturity. Your journey toward inner peace begins here. 5. Surrendering to the depths. Empaths often try to stay above the emotional storm, explaining their feelings and actions to be understood, hoping logic can soothe what the heart feels too deeply. Yet the more they explain, the further they drift from themselves. Real peace does not come from being understood. It comes from surrender. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is the essence of spirituality, to dive into the unconscious, to let the flood of emotions rise and baptize the soul instead of resisting it. When you stop trying to control how others see you, when you stop overanalyzing every feeling to make it acceptable, you begin to touch the sacred silence that lives beneath the surface of words. It is in that quiet space that your spirit breathes again, no longer trapped in the endless effort to be seen, validated, or understood. This is where true spiritual development begins, in the surrender, in the willingness to let go of the armor of explanation and to trust the deep intelligence of your own being. You realize that not everyone is capable of feeling what you feel or seeing life through the same emotional lens, and that is not your burden to carry. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a compass. And when you stop trying to justify your depth, it starts guiding you home. Like water returning to its natural flow, your energy stabilizes when you stop fighting the current. You are no longer afraid of the depth. for you understand that the unconscious of the vast ocean within is not an enemy, but a healer. Its waves do not come to drown you. They come to cleanse you, to release the heaviness of constantly performing emotional understanding. Surrendering, then, is not weakness, but wisdom. It is a sacred act of faith, a choice to trust the rhythm of life instead of micromanaging it through over-explanation. When you surrender, you let silence speak for you. You no longer chase clarity through conversation because your peace no longer depends on anyone's approval. The stillness within you becomes your anchor, and from that place, your presence begins to communicate more powerfully than your words ever could. This is the turning point for the empath, when you stop explaining your heart and simply live it. The noise fades, the anxiety softens, and peace arises like sunlight breaking through the water's surface. You understand that your role is not to be understood by all, but to remain rooted in compassion without losing yourself. The depth of your emotions becomes your sanctuary, not your struggle. And from that quiet surrender, you finally discover that peace was never something to achieve. It was always waiting beneath the surface, in the silence where your soul finally rests. 6. Silence as inner alchemy. Each time you try to explain yourself, a small part of your energy escapes into the air like mist. But silence, in its sacred stillness, gathers it back and refines it into light. Through silence, the empath no longer bleeds energy through endless justification. Instead, their inner world becomes radiant, calm, and powerful. What once felt like emotional detachment is actually transformation in disguise, a deep shift from needing to be understood to simply being. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you can only become that through stillness. Every moment you stop defending your truth, your energy stops leaking. Your silence becomes a container of power, and your peace begins to speak louder than any explanation ever could. When you stop explaining, your vibration stabilizes. You begin to see that silence is not withdrawal, but mastery, the kind of mastery that comes from spiritual wisdom, from realizing that not everyone is meant to hear your truth. The empath, who once carried the emotional chaos of others, starts to stand firm in their own energy, glowing quietly with self-assurance. In the silence, your frequency rises. Your presence begins to heal without words. You start to feel life breathing through you, not demanding, not proving, just flowing. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Silence is that moment of awakening when you become aware of your inner rhythm, when you stop reacting and begin observing with clarity. As this awareness deepens, you realize silence is not emptiness, but divine fullness. You no longer chase understanding. You embody it. You no longer plead for acceptance. You radiate authenticity. In the quiet, the empath's energy refines into something magnetic, calm, commanding, and deeply healing. You communicate now, not through defense, but through presence, not through noise, but through essence. Every breath becomes a statement, every still moment a declaration of self-sovereignty. The world feels your energy before it hears your voice. And in that sacred silence, your inner alchemy turns misunderstanding into peace, pain into wisdom, and isolation into divine protection. Your silence is not avoidance. It is evolution, the spiritual awakening that teaches you that sometimes the loudest truth is said without a single word. Stay connected with our community of spiritual wisdom by subscribing to Spiritual Wisdom. Here, we explore the power of silence, inner peace, and spiritual awakening. Remember, true transformation begins not in noise, but in the quiet alchemy of your soul. 7. The shift from empath to sage. The empath evolves into what Carl Jung would call the sage archetype, a being who feels deeply, yet is no longer consumed by emotion, who loves without losing themselves, and who helps without rescuing. This transformation is not about shutting down empathy, but about refining it into conscious awareness. It is the moment when you begin to sense everything around you, but are no longer defined by it. You feel without absorbing. You understand without interfering. The once overwhelming sensitivity that used to drown you now becomes serenity. You stop trying to fix people and instead begin to harmonize with life itself. You see that some souls need to experience their own storms to awaken, and by rushing to save them, you would rob them of the very wisdom their pain is meant to bring. So, you learn to stay present without absorbing their chaos, to care without carrying, to love without losing your center. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Your peace becomes more important than your need to be right, and your silence becomes your new form of communication. The calm energy you embody starts speaking louder than any justification ever could. You finally understand that boundaries are not walls. They are sacred edges that protect the temple of your energy. You no longer chase after those who mistake your compassion for weakness, because you now realize that true spirituality is not self-sacrifice, it is self-honoring. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in this awakening, you finally begin to live that truth. You stop rescuing others from their lessons, allowing the universe to teach what only experience can. Through this shift, you begin to see that every connection is an energetic exchange. Overgiving creates imbalance. Explaining drains your essence. But when you hold your ground with quiet certainty, the energy realigns itself naturally. You stop performing for love and start radiating authenticity. You trust that what is meant for you will recognize your frequency without persuasion. This is spiritual wisdom in motion, a serenity born from self-awareness and emotional maturity. You no longer see peace as the absence of pain, but as the presence of understanding. Your spirituality and spiritual awakening are no longer about floating above the world, but standing firmly within it, clear, centered, and sovereign. You have become the sage who listens more than speaks, observes more than reacts, and feels everything without being undone by it. And in that stillness, you find the quiet miracle that was waiting for you all along. Freedom through peace, wisdom through detachment, and love through wholeness. Do you feel this transformation within you? If you do, claim it now in the comments. I am evolving from empath to sage, calm, wise, and free. 8. Boundaries as sacred vessels of love. Love without boundaries is chaos. For when love loses its sacred shape, it begins to consume rather than create. In the path of spirituality and spiritual development, you will come to realize that silence and no are not signs of rejection, but of self-respect, the purest expressions of love that protect your dignity. Saying no does not close your heart. It clears space for peace to enter. The empath eventually learns that boundaries are not walls, but vessels through which divine love flows freely, without distortion or depletion. Boundaries give love its rhythm, its balance, its holiness. They remind you that unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. It means honoring what is sacred within you so that love remains whole, not scattered among those who take without giving. The empath's heart often feels compelled to explain, to heal, to justify. Yet every unnecessary explanation is a silent confession of self-doubt. You cannot convince others of your purity if they are committed to misunderstanding it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To live that truth, you must stop defending your kindness to those who benefit from your confusion. When you stop explaining, you reclaim the energy once used to prove your worth. You turn that energy inward, and in that inward turning, peace begins to rise like the dawn after a long storm. Silence, once feared as emptiness, becomes your greatest teacher. It teaches that peace is not the absence of noise, but the presence of clarity. Boundaries are love with structure. They protect what is divine in you while allowing others to meet you in mutual respect. Each no you speak from the heart is an act of devotion to your higher self. It says, "I will not abandon my soul for acceptance." In doing so, you transform love from chaos into order, from codependency into sacred connection. You begin to understand that real empathy is not absorbing everyone's pain. It is standing in love's truth without drowning in its illusion. It is the wisdom to know that compassion without balance leads to self-erasure. When you protect your energy, you protect the very source through which love expresses itself. As your spiritual development deepens, you realize that peace does not require explanation. It requires alignment. The empath, who once feared being misunderstood, now cherishes being at peace more than being approved. You stop arguing to be seen and start choosing to be still. You stop performing for love and start embodying it. And as you hold your ground in silence, those meant for you will feel your truth without needing words. Boundaries become the quiet language of self-respect, the invisible aura that shields your light. They are not barriers to love. They are love matured, refined by experience and sanctified by truth. In this sacred stillness, love returns to its purest form, rooted, peaceful, and divine. 9. Transformation through solitude. After silence comes loneliness, the dark night of the empath's soul. But this solitude is not a curse. It is purification. In the quiet, everything false begins to fall away. The ego loses its grip, and what's left is the soul, raw and luminous. You stop explaining yourself to those who can't feel your heart, and instead, you begin to listen to the deeper voice within. As Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." When you finally turn inward, you realize that silence is not emptiness. It is truth in its purest form, a bridge between the seen and unseen. Your silence becomes prayer, and prayer becomes energy. Every thought, every feeling you once tried to justify, transforms into light. You no longer seek to be understood because you begin to understand yourself. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom, to know that peace does not come from convincing others, but from resting in your own clarity. Stillness replaces speech, and the language of the spirit begins to speak louder than words ever could. You start to recognize that explanation is an energy leak. And the moment you stop leaking, your power returns home. In solitude, your sensitivity turns into strength. The same depth that once made you feel overwhelmed now makes you aware. You see that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, that boundaries are acts of love, not walls of fear. Peace arises not from being seen, but from seeing clearly. The less you explain, the lighter you become, because explaining was never your job. Healing was. You start to see your silence as protection, your distance as devotion, your detachment as wisdom. Jung taught that healing is not about perfection, but wholeness, and this is where that truth begins to unfold. When you no longer need to prove, only to be. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you choose mastery over chaos. You learn that the universe doesn't reward explanation, it rewards alignment. Your energy begins to mirror peace itself, vibrating on the frequency of trust. You stop reaching for closure in conversations and start finding closure in your own calm. We hope this reflection on transformation through solitude has inspired you to embrace the sacred silence where true growth begins. If you're ready to honor your own journey of spiritual awakening and inner peace, comment, "I choose solitude," below. Your words remind others that stillness can be the most powerful teacher of all. 10. The return to the self. The empath's path is a quiet return to the origin, where feeling becomes the highest form of awareness. Once, every emotion was heavy. Every vibration around felt like thunder in your chest, and you tried endlessly to make others understand what you could barely express. You explained your love, justified your pain, and carried the emotional weight of those who could not carry their own. But the true turning point comes when you stop trying to be understood and begin to understand yourself. As Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. This is where spirituality begins, not in the search for answers outside, but in the still recognition that everything you've been seeking already lives within you. The empath who once drowned in emotion now learns to breathe through it, realizing that feeling deeply is not a burden, but divine communication, a sacred language of the soul. When you stop explaining, something miraculous happens. Peace finds you. You no longer feel the need to defend your intentions or soften your truth for the comfort of others. You stop apologizing for your depth. You begin to see that your sensitivity was never weakness. It was spiritual intelligence in disguise, a higher consciousness working through your heart. You start embodying the energy you once tried to explain. Love becomes your presence. Truth becomes your aura. And compassion becomes your quiet strength. You learn to stay centered, even in chaos, because your peace no longer depends on how others treat you. It depends on how deeply you stay connected to your own essence. In this awareness, you realize that silence speaks louder than explanation, and your energy says more than your words ever could. Every empath must walk through the valley of overgiving to arrive at the mountain of inner power. You stop rescuing those who refuse to rise and begin honoring the sacred boundaries that protect your spirit. You see now that not everyone deserves access to your light, and that walking away is not cruelty, it is alignment. The same heart that once begged to be understood now glows in quiet confidence, radiating serenity without seeking validation. You embody what Jung called the individuation process, where you become whole, no longer fragmented by others' expectations. This is the true mark of spiritual awakening, when your empathy no longer drains you because it flows from divine consciousness rather than emotional survival. You no longer chase love, you become it. And in that becoming, feeling transforms into revelation. You sense the universe whispering through your emotions, guiding you gently toward truth. Pain no longer terrifies you because it has become your teacher, showing you where you once abandoned yourself. Each breath, each heartbeat is now infused with awareness. You exist not as a reaction, but as a reflection of divine stillness. The empath who once suffered now radiates silent love, a calm mirror in a restless world. You understand now that peace is not the absence of feeling, it is the sacred mastery of it. You do not explain love, truth, or pain anymore. You embody them. You are no longer just an empath. You are a presence itself, a vessel of spiritual wisdom, a living expression of divine consciousness. And so, dear soul, remember this. When the empath finally stops explaining, peace doesn't just visit, it takes root within. You no longer need to justify your sensitivity, your silence, or your boundaries. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is not the absence of love, but its complement." True spiritual wisdom begins when you stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. From that moment, your energy becomes sacred, your presence becomes powerful, and your peace becomes non-negotiable. If this message from spiritual wisdom spoke to your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming journeys into the depths of consciousness, empathy, and awakening. Your peace begins here. Choose it, nurture it, and never apologize for it.